What's up, guys? Welcome to Nolan Talks. It's been a crazy day for LSU football. A lot of interesting things have happened today. A lot of people been let go on the LSU coaching staff. Let's get right into it. So let's first start off from the top with saying thank you to Steve Ensminger. He was the offensive coordinator. For those of you who do not know, he was the offensive coordinator for LSU for, I think, from 2016 to this past season. And he was with the staff for about 11 seasons. He was the offensive coordinator back last season when LSU put on that historic best team of all time, best offense ever. Produced Joe Burrow into being the number one overall pick, breaking all the NCAA records of, I think, 65 touchdowns. Today he announced that he will no longer be the offensive coordinator. He's going to take a reassignment, but who really knows what that means? Reassignment can mean he's going to be an analyst. He'll just be kind of with the team when they're doing stuff. He might not be coaching as much. You never really know what that means. I'm sure that'll get announced sometime. Eventually it'll get announced, but as of right now, he will not be calling the plays for the LSU football team next season. He's one of my favorite coaches ever. I love him for the reason that he never says anything. I mean, good luck trying to find a recent video of him doing an interview with the media. I mean, I know he did some for the national championship game last year, but before that, I don't really think you're going to be able to find audio of him talking to the media. Apparently he's a very humble guy, and I can totally see it. He doesn't say much. He just works, and I love that. That's what you need as a coach at LSU. And wish him nothing but best. Very grateful for this guy. Steve Ensminger just did amazing things at LSU. It's a shame that he wasn't an offensive coordinator sooner in his career. That first season when he was the offensive coordinator, once Les Miles was dismissed, he did awesome. I think he replaced Cam Cameron, and literally his first game, he broke the LSU record for most yards in a game in a while, and it was against Mizzou. But yeah, it's a true shame he wasn't offered the OC job sooner. And then that next season, we hired the great, and I say that sarcastically, Matt Canada, and that didn't really work out. And then in 2018, Coach O came to his senses and hired Steve Ensminger, and a lot of great things he did for LSU, obviously the national championship, but he kind of rejuvenated our offense, gave us some juice, and, developed some solid quarterbacks, Miles Brennan, Joe Burrow, obviously, and, we got a lot of young talent now, but he made Danny Etling a draftable quarterback. I don't think he got drafted, but he made Danny Etling, Danny Etling's still in the NFL. So Steve Ensminger, wish you the best. Very grateful for you. Hopefully you still stick around, doing something for the team. But he was a loyal LSU guy, and we're very grateful for him. And in other news, Scott Linehan has been let go as the passing game coordinator for LSU. He was brought in to be a red zone and a third down specialist, and he didn't really do a great job at that. He's also meant to develop quarterbacks, and we'll give him the benefit of the doubt in that area because, we had Miles Brennan who played whatever, that's up to your opinion. I thought Miles Brennan played pretty decent. Obviously that first game of the year didn't play super well, but he played overall pretty decent. Obviously he had the injury. Scott Linehan was also the same was the guy who called the last play against Mizzou, and obviously that didn't work out. We lost the game because that play didn't really work, and he was the guy. He was brought in to make those red zone calls and whatnot. I looked up the stats because I was pretty curious. LSU ranked 102 in third down conversions, and they were at 34.6%. And then we ranked 104 in red zone touchdowns, which was 52.9%. Which obviously that number is pretty skewed based on the revolving door we had this past season at quarterback. So you never really know what that number would be like if we had a guy like Miles Brennan back there, or if we just stuck with one of the freshman quarterbacks throughout the whole year. You never really know. But as far as it goes for third down percentage, that's terrible. 34.6% is awful. That's not going to win you many games. Red zone was 52.9. That's average, and you don't want that, especially if you're a team like LSU competing for national championships. You do not want to be at a 52.9% in the red zone. His buyout's gonna be about $1 million, and we paid him I think $800,000 for this past season, and his buyout's gonna be $1 million. He was kind of an older coach. He's probably late 50s or early 60s. I know he coached the Dallas Cowboys, but I had a little bit more hype for him. I thought he was being pretty solid for us. Passing game coordinator. Most teams don't really have a passing game coordinator. LSU is one of those teams that does have one, and I've kind of always thought that was kind of interesting because we have had like a run game coordinator too, and then like you see other teams across the country and they don't have one, so it's kind of like, okay, like I guess we just do that, and it is really what it is. I never really thought too much about it until like I started recording this, but it is what it is, and so Scott Linehan is out of there. And a lot of other changes, too. On the defensive side of the ball, Bill Bush is out, the safeties coach. He was a great recruiter. He brought in so many talented recruits in that secondary position. He was, once again, another older guy, so I think he was kind of a liability when it came to, like, relating to, like, these young, talented recruits. But, I mean, he did bring in some solid recruits. And I don't really know. This season's kind of hard to kind of rate his job because – prior to this past season, our safety play has been phenomenal. We had guys like Grant Delpit. I don't know if Jamal Adams, and we've just had some solid safeties. I can't think of the names off the top of my head, but we've had good safeties there, and he did a pretty solid job when it comes to like developing safeties and whatnot. But this past year, you can't really judge him based on that because we kind of struggled there so much. Also, Bill Johnson's retiring, kind of in the same role as Steve Ensminger. He's taking that transition role, whatever that really means. Like I said, we'll probably find out later what that really means. He was a liability when it came to recruiting. He never brought in, high 4-star recruits on the defensive line. He literally was not a good recruiter. I assume Coach Orgeron kind of took over when it came to recruiting the defensive line because that's Coach O's specialty is the defensive line. So I assume that's kind of like where Coach O stepped in and started recruiting that area because Bill Johnson didn't really do a great job as far as that. And also kind of makes you think, who's the next candidate going to take over that job? Christian Lockature is still on the staff. He's a GA, a graduate assistant. Apparently, he was the one who brought Mason Smith to LSU. So, hey, maybe he's promoted to defensive line. I still think coaches don't really like doing that. One guy's a GA for about a year, maybe 2 years. I think he's been there for about a year, but they don't really get promoted that quick to that role, to the defensive line coach at LSU. Happened with Dennis Johnson, obviously. Now he's a defensive line coach at Baylor with Dave Aranda, but you never know. I don't know if he's ready yet. I'm not in the practice field. I don't really see what's going on, with the breakdown of film and whatnot. But who knows? Maybe he gets promoted. He's the next defensive line coach. I would love to see that. I love seeing ex-players come back and coach, especially when it's for their team they play with when they were in college. I think that's pretty cool. This kind of makes you think as well, is James Craig's job safe? Obviously, last year they won the Offensive Line of the Year, but who really knows? Most LSU fans will tell you, watching the game, that the offensive line for LSU last year, we were solid, we were good, but best in the country, I think we were all kind of surprised once he won that award. James Craig has not recruited well at all. He landed the Michigan offensive lineman. I can't think of his name. I think it's Dellinger, the big guy out of Michigan. He was like a high 4-star recruit. He's probably the best recruit he's landed. We also got Doomerville out of Florida, but yet we've yet to see those guys develop and yet to see all the young guys develop and get on the field. So I think he kind of lacks in that developmental side of coaching. Recruiting, he's not very good. He's had a few good recruits, but I think it's time we kind of move on from James Craig personally. But I think it's going to all depend on Tristan Lee. If we can land a 5-star recruit like that, I think he keeps his job. If we don't land him, I think this is his last season. Maybe he'll get relieved within the next few weeks or tomorrow. You never really know. But I think the big flaw of this staff for all the coaches who got let go today is the age. I think they were so old. They were in their late 50s or in their 60s, and you can't do that now. They just can't relate to these 18-year-old high schoolers who come in. They got this TikTok, Twitter, social media, and all that stuff. And these older men who grew up with the the 80s, the 90s, and the 70s even, like, they can't relate to these kids. And that kind of hurts recruiting, we're still landing 5-star recruits. Like, Bill Bush is a good recruiter, but this hurts a team like LSU. Like, you got to have young, fresh faces out there. That's why Christian Lockature would be a great hire in the defensive line. I mean, he landed Mason Smith. Mason Smith is, 18, 19 years old? Christian Lockature is in his early 20s. Like, he's probably 25, 24. So he can kind of relate to these kids a little bit better. I think LSU's got to go towards that more, relating to these kids. That's why I think Corey Raymond's such a great recruiter. He can just relate to these kids so well. He's one of the youngest coaches on our staff. I'm not quite sure of his age. He's probably in his 40s, but like, he can relate with these young, talented defensive backs. And I think that kind of helps him when it comes to developing them as well. So he's another name who we retaining him for next season, but you never know. He's a guy who I know he was flirting with some NFL jobs. We'll have to stay tuned and see about that, but he's a coach we definitely need to keep. He's definitely been our most consistent over the years. I don't know how long he's been here for, but he's been our most consistent coach at LSU for a long time. And more on that Bo Pelini news. So I looked up his bio. I was just pretty curious because I wasn't sure of how much money we owe him. So this past season, we paid him $2.3 million just to coach this season, and basically he robbed from us because he did a terrible job. But and his buyout is $4.6 million. So we're owe him a total of $6.9 million, more or less. I'm sure there's other things, incentives in there and whatnot, but it's going to be a one-time payment. I just saw an article today that Bo Pelini's going to get that one check from LSU. They decided they're going to do a one-time payment, and they're going to send him the check, and then we'll be done with him. And obviously this is going to hurt us because that's a lot of money going to a coordinator. Plus we are paying Scott Linehan that $1 million buyout, especially in a COVID year where we lost, I believe it was $80 million in revenue. So LSU is going to be hurting when it comes to paying coaches next season. Coach O's probably going to have to restructure his contract, honestly, and give up some of his dough. But I'm sure that'll be in the news once we start hiring these new coordinators and new staff. But there's some names out there for this new offensive coordinator position. We have one guy on staff right now, Russ Callaway. He's a young gun. He was an offense coordinator for Samford for I think a few years actually, and he's like in his 30s, so he's pretty innovative. He's young. He's got a fresh mind. Apparently, he was the coach who he helped Miles Brennan after that Mississippi State loss. Apparently, Miles Brennan was struggling with stepping up in the pocket, and throughout that week, he worked with Russ Callaway, and Miles Brennan obviously got better the next week, and then the week after that, and apparently he's a excellent QB coach. He's a young guy. I think he's probably our number one option when it comes to the offensive coordinator position. I mean, he's coached offensive coordinator before, plus he's been at LSU for I think 2 years now. So he's worked with Coach Ensminger. He's even worked with Joe Brady. So he's got to know the offense like the back of his hand. Honestly, another name is Joe Brady, who we are not getting. So let's just move on from that one. He's an NFL guy. He's going to be an NFL coach within the next year, 2 years, 3 years. But he's an NFL guy, so I don't expect to land in a guy like that. George Munoz, also another guy who was an LSU guy. Last season, he actually coached. He was a passing game coordinator for Dave Aranda at Baylor. Yikes. Yeah, sure. I guess I kind of wanted him once Joe Brady left. I kind of hoping we would kind of retain him as our passing game coordinator, but things didn't work out like that. He decided to join Dave Aranda at Baylor, which is awesome. Good for him. But I looked up Baylor offense, and they ranked like next to dead last in the Big 12 last year. And that's just a sign of I think that it was probably best for LSU not to retain George Munoz. We'll bring him on as an analyst again or bring him on as a role on the staff, but when it comes to coaching offense coordinator, I don't really think I want a guy like that. I think he had his time at Baylor. Definitely don't think LSU should make a jump for him because this is a critical year for Coach Orgeron, honestly. He's got to hit on these hires, and I just don't think George Munoz is the right man for that job. Another name that a lot of LSU people might forget about, but it's the offensive coordinator for BYU, Jeff Grimes. People don't know this, but Jeff Grimes coached the offensive line at LSU a few years back. He was a run game coordinator. I believe he coached when we had Darius Geis and Leonard Fournette and maybe even Jeremy Hill and all those guys in between. He never really did a great job as far as recruiting, went for LSU, but as far as the run game, it was awesome. And if you take a look at this past season at BYU, I mean, this guy's insanely great at calling offense. I mean, Zach Wilson's going to be a first-round pick. Like, let's be honest. He's up for the Broyles Award, which is the Coordinator of the Year award. I think he's top 5. I'd probably give it to him, honestly. He's literally made BYU had one loss this season, and most of the credit was probably to Jeff Grimes. Jeff Grimes he's in his 40s, but hell, man, if he had more talent like he would at LSU, man, I think that's a guy we should be interested in looking at. And he has ties to LSU, so he'd probably cost a little bit more money than Russ Callaway would, honestly. And that's where the Bo Pelini hurts us. Us getting rid of Bo Pelini, because that buyout's just so much money, and it's going to be we're not going to be able to afford a guy like Jeff Grimes. I think he's going to want a little bit more money than Russ Callaway, but I think it's a name we should look at for sure. Bring him in for an interview. He has ties to Louisiana, LSU, so let's give him a shot. But I think Russ Callaway is going to be our guy, offense coordinator. Would I be surprised if Coach O looked at someone else? No, absolutely not. But I think next season Russ Callaway is going to get that job, and I look forward to hearing about what our next offense coordinator hire is. As far as defense coordinator goes, there's a few names that I think are pretty interesting. There's the Will Muschamp one, which most LSU fans are probably like, no, I don't want Will Muschamp. All he does is yell on the sideline and can't coach defense. At South Carolina, he coached an awful defense. At Auburn, this defense was okay. At Florida's defense was pretty solid, actually, but they don't want. Most of us do not want Muschamp. I think he's going to cost a lot of money as well. He'll probably be a little bit less than Bo Pelini, but he's a guy who's probably up for like a coaching job at like a lower Power 5 school. So I don't really think we would go for a guy like Muschamp. At least we really hope we don't. But he does have ties to LSU, so he's a name I'll have to throw out there. Derek Mason, he's a guy who I think's the favorite to get that job. I feel like a lot of people are just talking about him on Twitter, on this Tiger droppings. A lot of people really want Derek Mason. His defenses at Vanderbilt were pretty bad. That's because Vanderbilt can't really recruit at a high level. They don't get solid recruits. They're the joke of the SEC. But when he's at Stanford, he had good defenses, and those guys weren't super talented. While then again, at Stanford they did play a different style of offense. They had the power I, with Toby Gerhardt, Christian McCaffrey. They're going to line up. Their offense is going to hold on to the ball, have that high time of possession. We'll play solid defense. But I believe he had like a top 5 defense at Stanford for about a year or 2 years, and I think he's a smart guy. He could probably relate to these LSU players a little bit better because he's kind of younger. He's also a minority coach, so that'd be great look for LSU, honestly. And how about a guy named Corey Raymond? He's a guy who's been on the staff for who knows how long. Maybe, I think 10 years, maybe. Who knows? One of the longest tenured LSU coaches. The big question is, does he want that job? A lot of people are saying that we should have fired Bill Pelini sooner and promoted Corey Raymond to the defensive coordinator just to see what he's got. Do these players respond better to him? Who knows? Does he want that job? I'm sure we'll find out. I think Coach O should look inward first and look at a guy like Corey Raymond to see if he wants that job. I think he'd be a great coordinator for LSU. I mean, he produces dominant defensive backs. I'm sure he's solid when it comes to calling a defense. I'm sure he's picked up some things over the years from Dave Aranda, all the defense coordinators LSU's had before, And the hot name that everyone seems to want right now is this Marcus Freeman from Cincinnati. I really don't know too much about him. I'd be lying to you if I said I've watched Cincinnati football this year. I know they're undefeated. They're 8-0 and they have a really good defense. He's also up for the Broyles Award this year. He's a young guy. He's 34 years old. He's got 12 kids. Not 12. I was kidding, but he's got a lot of kids. He's gonna be a guy who's gonna be a head coach pretty soon. Honestly, I think the defensive coordinator job at LSU is equivalent to a lower Power 5 head coaching job. I really do. I think that if he does well in the SEC, at LSU, he could jump to that top, Power 5 head coaching job right away. I think, sure, why not? Another issue we're going to have, though, is paying him. I think that's going to be the biggest struggle with LSU this next season when it comes to hiring staff. Can we afford these young guys? Can we afford these coaches who are trying to make a name for themselves, who are on the hot list, who are expecting a lot more money? You know what I'm saying? Who knows? I'm definitely going to have to start watching more film on Marcus Freeman, seeing what he's got, seeing the defense he runs at Cincinnati. Yeah, he's a young coach. He's a minority coach as well. I think that'd be another great look for LSU. I think he could relate to these players a lot better as well. I say why not? I'm a big believer in the young coaches just help out with recruiting so much. They got that fire and that energy in them, and they got something to prove. And I think that going for young coaches like Russ Callaway at offensive coordinator, Marcus Freeman at defense coordinator, why not? Let's take a risk, let's take a shot. And I think this is the most important year of Coach Orgeron's career, honestly, because, man, he's got to hit on these hires. He swung and missed on the Bo Pelini hire, swung and missed on the Matt Canada hire. He's just made some questionable hires in his career. Scott Linehan has been a miss. He's got to have a good year. He's got to have a great offseason when it comes to hires. I have faith in Coach O. He's a culture guy, so he'll get the culture right. I think he'll make the right hires. I have faith in him. Only time will tell. We'll see. I just hope he goes young when it comes to the staff. And I'm really interested to see the news these next few days, these next few weeks, these next few months as to who Coach Orgeron is interested in hiring. That's all I have for you guys. Thanks for listening. I love you guys. Love LSU, and go Tigers.